PenCraft Writers and Illustrators Alliance. I am Linda Brody, if you don't know me. And we're so happy to have you, everyone. It's great. I love when we all come together to talk books and writing, and it just feeds my soul. And maybe, hopefully it does yours too. I have some announcements. The Arts Festival sign-ups should be... Okay. Can we have just a plain sheet of paper? Or, because by the next meeting it's going to be too late. We need to do it. We need to get these sign-ups.
Linda, he's got one.
Fallon, I'm pretty much going to be there.
Okay.
For a few days of that.
The festival is going to be April 15th and 16th at the 11th Civic Center. It won't cost you anything. Caprock pays for the table, and you can bring your books or your assigned time to be there. And you keep all the proceeds, and you take care of all the money and the books. We should have 2 tables. I confirmed with Elizabeth over at the literacy, and she assured us that we would have 2 tables, so hopefully. We have some beautiful new logo. Well, we're trying to see what we want. And Sterling Cheney, the very talented, he is so talented. So he has designed 2 new ones, and then you can look at the old, you can look at the 2 new ones, and we're going to vote at the end of the meeting. There will be on that table over there, but I'm going to pass this around. Okay. They're very nice. We have Dr. Rosalind Miller wants to join our board as the cookbook and anthology person. And we need to vote on that today. So I guess she was our speaker last night, and she is so full of energy. We need people with energy. That'd be very welcome. So can I see a show of hands for everyone who approves Dr. Rosalind Miller? Okay, thank you. So she's our new board member. She will make the 12th. And I'm looking forward to working with her. She has so many great ideas, and we need someone to head that up. She seems to be very knowledgeable, and I think we'll have a wonderful product in the end. So also there will be more information coming on the cookbook, and we need recipes. So anyway, all that information will be coming soon. We're having lunch today at Picasso's on Milwaukee, at 7611 Milwaukee. We I think we'll have a private room and not be so cramped like we were at Caprock, the Caprock Cafe. That was a good place, and they were so warm and friendly and welcoming, but it was so small. So we're going to try Picasso's, and that will be right after the meeting. Do we need to make reservations or tell them how?
Can we get a quick count of who thinks they want to go? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-ish? Okay, we're taking it for sure.
6, maybe August.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have the raffle back on the side back there. If you want to try to win one of the prizes, the tickets are $1 a piece, 5 for $3, and 10 for 7. 10 for 7. So, and the money is going to be used to go toward our 501c3. And I'm very excited about that, that we're getting started. And if I hadn't had surgery, Monday would be further along. But anyway, it is what it is. Also, I want to announce that Texas South Plains Writers in Amarillo has a one-day workshop on the 18th, and it's free. There's no, you don't have to pay, so it's at the Amarillo Public Library downtown on 412 Southeast 4th, and it starts at 10 a.m. That's on next Saturday. So now we're going to. I'm going to introduce Tom Nichols, who we're spotlighting this month. Every month we spotlight one of the members to tell us about what they're doing, what they've done, just a short segment. So this is Tom Nichols.
Thank you. Well, I've been writing for a long time, and as I was just making some notes to get ready to come down here this morning, I've actually been writing for either 53 or 54 years. I didn't realize that. I didn't know I was that old. But my writing career actually started when I became a cop. And I was a cop for 50 years. And I had every job you could ever imagine, plus I had every job you've never heard of. Starting out as an assistant jailer, that's the lowest that you could possibly be in the hierarchy. It's the worst job in the world, up to chief of police, and everything in between. But what that amounted to was I did get a lot of experience and saw the inside of a lot of things that I knew about but didn't really know about. I got to do a lot of things, meet a lot of people, did a lot of traveling, and one of the bright spots, I had many bright spots, you also have your bad days too, but that as I rose in ranks over those 50 years, all these different assignments from narcotics, organized crime, budget, administration, planning and research, policy development, patrol. I was just doing everything. And in the process, worked with 2 or 3 different chiefs. And somehow or other, I was identified as a guy who liked to write, which is true. I've always enjoyed it. So I ended up writing a lot of research papers. I would conduct research myself, sometimes staying in town, sometimes traveling around the country, different universities, different cities, different counties, doing research, conducting research projects myself with a couple of other people that I worked with. I wrote papers, I wrote newspaper articles, I wrote magazine articles. I have no idea how much I wrote, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of published papers. I guess we don't even count those really now. I'm sorry about being a published author. Well, I was probably a published author when I was about 33 or 34 years old. I didn't realize it at the time. But by and by, after 50 years of policing, I did what we euphemistically call, I pulled the pin. I retired. And I had all these stories up here. millions, millions, millions of stories. And so I really just kicked back and retired for about 6 months. And then I had to get to work, and I thought, I've got stories to tell. And so the first story I told was a book called Color the Prism. And this was just like magic. I had no idea. I still know what I'm doing, writing books and selling books. But I had a great success with that. One day I just got a call from a man I'd never heard of before. He said he's interested in my book, and could I come to California and send him an invitation to one of these beautiful Hollywood Hills parties on a Sunday afternoon. Really nice. And I was the only author there. There were 50 people. One author, 49 movie directors and executives. And this was like, what the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. And they were in line. And I stood outside by the pool. My wife just kept the 7-Up and iced tea coming to me and interviewing people. And they just kept it steady coming all afternoon. And at the end, the owner of the place said, nice to meet you, Mr. Nichols. Good luck. He shook my hand and led me to the door and out. And I thought, oh. But I did feel good about it. And a couple of weeks later, I just in my office had a call, and the secretary said, Mr. Tarantino wants to talk to you. Well, I'm the one, he's kind of a crazy guy. Yeah. So anyway, I sold my movie rights to Tarantino Productions. Traveled all over the United States with that book. Meeting with people from New York City to Las Vegas to San Diego, Hollywood 2 or 3 different times. Bottom line is, I never made the movie. But we also made a pretty good bit of money out of it. And so I found out I do enjoy writing. I really do. And so I really started telling stories. And these are stories that I live. Every book I write is that close to the truth. Color the Prism, I had to have an attorney go through it with me, because I was really hitting close to the nail on the head on who was who, but I had to keep it fictitious for liability purposes. And so everything I write is something either I did, or my troops did, or I was involved with one way or the other. Then to add to that, my wife, I've been fortunate enough, been blessed that we're able to travel. And so if I've got a book set in the Mideast, we've been to the Mideast a couple of times, been to Russia twice. We've traveled all of Eastern, Western Europe, Scotland, Ireland, all over the United States. And so those are all research trips. You might think it's a vacation. It's not a vacation. It's a research trip. I'm the writer and she's the editor. So, there's a percentage of that that's tax deductible. And so that's what goes into my books. So as we stand here right now, I've got 8 or 9 books published, and I have another one coming out, working with KJ here in the next few months. And my current project is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I had no idea what I was doing. If I knew what I was going to do, I would never have done it. Well, I had one book that I really wanted to write. It was a Christian novel. I'm writing murder, robbery, maybe and so forth. About the good guys. And that was in my early writing career. I never liked that book. I thought, it's hollow, it's shallow. So I decided here after about 12, 13, 14 months ago, I liked the story of the book. So I thought, I'm going to rewrite it. Oh my gosh. Never do that. It's so hard to rewrite. But anyway, and some of you have been critiquing it, and so it's we're down to the last 3 chapters right now, and I think I will have them done in 3 weeks. So part of what I do with our little tricks about writing, called them tricks, my style of writing, is number one, I've either done it myself, or I've worked with this person or that person, and we did it together, or I just go there and learn it. I went to Moscow. When I went to Moscow, one day I said, I'm just going to take off by myself. I don't speak Russian. But you learn at doing things. But when we get home and I go to write, and you may think I'm really stupid, but it takes a lot of time. I've developed the storyline and the characters. And generally you don't have 3 or 4 primary characters, maybe 5. I want to see them. And so I go to IMDb files on the computer. And I have a mental picture of what I want Hector to look like. I'm going to go through 100 guys, and I'll find one. That would be Hector. I print him out. I do that for all my main characters. Then when I'm writing, if this is a Hector scene, Hector's posted up right here next to the computer. So I can visualize Hector or Anita or whoever it is doing that. And then along the same lines, something I like to do is I broaden my reading style or my reading types of what I want to read. I read very few mysteries, although I do read some Daniel Silva's, Stig Larsson, but I read Zane Grey, Larry Mercury, different ones, get a broad taste of writing. I think Zane Grey actually is my favorite writer. I think he can present a scene like nobody else can present a scene. So I love writing. So my next venture is to finish up the book that was entitled The Third Dawn, referring to the resurrection of the third dawn, and that's my biblical novel. And that may be my last book. I'm coming up on my 84th birthday. It takes a while to write a book, and sometime I may just want to play golf. So if you have any questions, how I write, why I write, with whom I write, that's your thought. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I was just going to say, I'm glad that you didn't know how hard that was going to be to write that book. Because I'm in Tom's critique group, and I've been reading this revision, this rewriting, and I know it's been difficult, but it's totally worth it. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm glad you did that. That work is going to make. All right, good morning, everybody. It's so great to see so many faces here this morning. It's a beautiful, beautiful morning outside, and we have this gorgeous artwork in our meeting space, and so I'm glad to be here, and I know y'all are going to be glad you're here too after you hear our speaker. I want to let y'all know I was talking to Rick Treon, and I asked him if he needed a projector, and he said he was going to bring a PowerPoint to present along with his talk, and so I brought my projector up here this morning, and I didn't have a power cord. And so I have lured him here with false pretense of technology that he does not have. And so I've heard him speak before. I know he's going to do fine. He's completely able to wing it. But if it ever seems like during his presentation that things are a little awkward, it's my fault and not his. Just know that.
I can come up and do charades while we talk.
Okay, you want to act out some things? That'd be great. I'm sure he would appreciate that. I also want to let you know that he is going to be signing books at Wildlark Books this afternoon from 2 to 4. So if you have not been to Wildlark yet, please go. Please go. It's a beautiful little store, and Brianne, the owner, is very supportive of local authors, and it's a great place to be, and plus you get some great books too. So Wildlark this afternoon from 2 to 4. And now, Rick Treon writes about life and death in the Lone Star State. His speculative action thriller, Divided States, won the 2022 PenCraft Award for Literary Excellence in Thrillers and was shortlisted for the Silver Falchion Award and Best Thriller Book Award. His debut novel, Deep Background, won the 2019 PenCraft Award for Literary Excellence in Suspense, and Let the Guilty Pay was nominated for the 2021 Silver Falchion Award for Best Suspense Novel and the PenCraft Award for Literary Excellence in Suspense. Before making up stories, he was a reporter and top editor for several newspapers in Texas, where he still lives and writes. So please join me in welcoming Rick Treon.
All right, thank you, Kim, and thank you, everybody, for having me. I really appreciate it. A few years ago, I wouldn't have ever thought I'd be traveling anywhere to give speeches about fiction and that sort of thing, but I realized that writing fiction was a lot easier than being a reporter, because I get to make up the stories rather than trying to dig uncover the truth. I to make up the truth, which is easier and harder all at the same time, but it's more fun in any case. So today's presentation is, I titled it Picking Up the Pace, and it's about pacing in your novels. And I write crime fiction, as you just heard, where pacing is top priority for a lot of readers, and because they are expecting to be pulled through a story. But I feel like there are a lot of things that you can apply no matter what genre you're reading. And pacing is also important if you are trying to get your books, get them in front of agents and editors and publishers and trying to go that route. Because if they're not hooked early, then they have to move on. And as the editorial director for a small press myself in Hannah Publishing, I can attest to that. I don't have enough time to read everything, so I have to learn how to decide early whether or not this book was going to be something that was going to catch readers' attention. Picking up the pace, basically how to write a page turner or how to write something that resembles that so that your readers will pull through a story. You've heard all about me, and the one thing you should know is that none of my 4 novels have been optioned by Quentin Tarantino. So, pacing, as I just alluded to, is one of the top critiques that agents and editors have for stories that are getting submitted to them. And of course, what is pacing? It's in running, obviously, it's the pace at which you run. But for novels, it's how quickly readers feel like they are consuming your story. And we all hear the term page turner, and we'll go into a little bit of the science behind making your book literally, like turn the pages faster. But no matter how long it takes for someone to actually read a book, you want them to, even if they're only reading an hour a night, although your goal should be to have them read until their eyes won't stay open anymore, it's how quickly they feel like they're getting through your story. Because we've all read novels that are 400 pages long, but you felt like you like, where did the time go? You sometimes read a book in a whole day, it's that long. So it's about how quickly they feel like they're consuming your story. So pitfalls are, there's not enough happening in the early chapters. We all probably heard about the saggy middle. Readers getting lost in sentences or paragraphs, and they're drifting off and they have to restart where they were reading. But also a problem can be not slowing down in the right places too. I've definitely struggled to get through books where it's absolute non-stop action and I don't have time to process along with the characters what has just happened, because you're just going from action set piece to action set piece. And you can avoid some of these things, as I'm going to lay out, on both a macro level, a big picture, and the micro level, the details and the length of different elements of your book. But we'll start with the macro, the 30,000-foot view. We'll talk about plot. We're going to talk about structure, not necessarily the 3-act of the hero's journey. There's plenty of information out about that. But in terms of how you tell your story and timelines and points of view and stuff like that, we'll talk about the ticking clock and compressing whatever timeline or timelines you have. So, for the plot, the first thing, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on the beginning of your story because for both business and readership reasons, and because it's one of the hardest things to do, you want to jumpstart your story early. And I feel like no matter the genre, even if it's literary fiction, which by definition has no genre, but we're going to talk about that later, getting to your inciting incident early is the key to keeping your readers moving along with you. So as I said, I write crime fiction, and so pacing is one of the most important things that agents and editors and astute readers and other writers look for whenever they are going to read, a mystery or a thriller. And of course, there are different subgenres that, there's different pacings in all of them, but a lot of the same rules apply. So if you're writing a mystery or thriller, essentially what you're asking yourself as the writer is, how early does someone die or get threatened with their life? I say, you should be able to do it in the first 5 to 10 pages if you can. A lot of mysteries, if they're procedural, start with the detective walking up to the dead body, even if it's the first in a series. And if you know, I've had bodies on, I've had bullets flying on page 1 for thrillers, so I mean that's totally okay. A lot of people say the first act of your story, you have to get to know your characters. But I feel like you can get to know your characters best by having them deal with the dead body or what's flying at them. You learn a lot about somebody when they're put in that type of situation. For suspense, what you might call a pot boiler sometimes, things move a little slower. But the question you're going to ask yourself is how quickly do things start going wrong for my protagonist? I think if that's the question, that should happen on the first or second page. And the question you need to ask your readers that's going to tie into the end of your book, the last thing you're going to answer in your climax and your resolution should be something you're asking on page 1 or 2. And that's a a lot of people call that a closed loop story. Even if it's a series, you want to write a standalone, and so that's the loop you're closing. You're asking or posing a question early to your reader: who's the bad guy? Why is this person waking up in a dungeon in a city that's not their own? And then you're going to answer and get the whole story by the very end. For science fiction, fantasy, romance, and other genres, there aren't the same exact questions because the genres all differ and always, remain true to the different tropes and the different reader expectations in your genre. But how quickly does the main conflict present itself? And then for literary fiction, I think most literary fiction can be put into a genre. Take Where the Crawdads Sing. It is a crime story. It is part legal thriller. And then also it has a lot of beautiful coming-of-age stuff and man versus nature, in this case woman versus nature. But I think you can look at it as a crime story too. It's actually structured that way from the very beginning and for the third act. So how can you improve your opening? Because if you've heard what I've said, say, there's some stuff I can look at. Here's some actionable things. Think about starting in media res, in the middle of things, and introduce your setting as your main character interacts. So I think especially in science fiction, fantasy, and I hear this from authors in that genre, so this is not a critique, it's something that they struggle with, is having the first 3 or 4 pages be nothing but describing the world that they're in. Because it's going to be, most of the time, different than, the contemporary world that we're in. So historical in any genre can also suffer from this too. I cheat by writing in now or in the very near future, so I don't have to worry about it as much. But you don't want to start with 3 pages describing all that stuff, but you can trickle in everything that you have in that big info dump at the beginning as your character sees things, as they talk to characters who maybe aren't human or are from a different part of the world or whatever it is. So you can reveal that setting and you can reveal your main character through actions as they're moving through your setting as opposed to a lot of exposition. As I said, you want to avoid info dumping early, especially with background information, because a lot of people, if you start in media res, they say, okay, but God, the reader needs to know all this stuff to really get what's happening. And so their instinct is to do 3 or 4 sentences in media res and then do 2 or 3 pages of the backstory. Reveal the backstory as it needs to be known. And also, you can do some of that through dialogue, talking to other characters. You don't want too much exposition and dialogue. We've all watched really bad TV where somebody does a monologue explaining their entire backstory in 2 minutes. That's not good either. But there are ways to weave it in there. And you want short sentences, short clauses, even if it's, a clause every paragraph or every other paragraph, kind of like alluding to what a character's saying. But don't feel like you need to explain everything, because every reader at the very beginning, they want a little mystery. They want to say, ooh, that's intriguing, and they're trusting you as the author to answer. Now, if you don't answer the questions that you're posing, that can be a problem. But readers don't mind you posing the questions early. And in fact, one of the best ways to get narrative momentum and pull someone through that story is to ask a question and answer it, the same time, right thereafter, ask an even bigger question, and then ask an even bigger question that is related to or in lieu of raising the stakes, depending on what genre you're in. But that's how I look at it, is asking and answering questions. If you're doing that throughout the story, then your reader is going to want to know what happens next. They're going to want the answers, as long as you keep providing them, and keep providing them in exciting and evocative ways, they're going to keep reading them. They're going to trust you more. And so why is the beginning so important for the business of publishing, which I was talking about earlier? If you've queried agents or your book's been out on submission through an agent or with independent presses, agents and editors read, sometimes they want the first 3 chapters, first 50 pages. Every editor and agent is different on what length they ask for. And then getting the full manuscript request, getting a request for a full, means that you have hooked them in that amount of time. So 50 pages would probably be the longest. 3 chapters, if they don't have to know what happens next, they're going to say no. And that is your goal with both readers and agents and editors, is to, if after 3 chapters, they don't have to know what's coming next, their interest isn't piqued that much, then they're probably going to move on. And if you have books in Kindle Unlimited, the more you pull a reader through your book, the more pages they're going to read, the more money in your pocket. So if you're self-published or your traditional publisher puts you in KU, then the longer they read, the more money you get. So that's another reason why this stuff, in my opinion, is important no matter what you're writing. So I call this an exercise. It's not really, you don't have to actually write anything down, but think about in your current work in progress, think about the main question that your protagonist needs answered, or the main problem they have to solve. And are you asking that question really early? Is it in the first chapter? Is it on the first page? If it's not the first 3 chapters, then as I said, sometimes that's all you get when you're submitting to people, then you need to move it up. Because if you haven't already asked that question, then the reader is wondering why they're reading your book. No matter how beautifully it's written, I promise you, they also want that intrigue, and they want to have a reason to read your story. And think about what you can do if you feel like you want to move it up. Think about ways that you can do that. And we'll take this little moment. I know I just got started, but we can take a little break because I forgot my water bottle, so I definitely need to go get that. But yeah, if you need to go and do something, but just think about that and see if anything I've said resonates, and hopefully it's at least got you thinking about your progress. But I'll get back to you.
Can I ask you to frame it just for us, like in a bullet point question? You were talking about what is the reason, what's the why. Can you help me just simplify that while we think about it?
Yeah. So it's the first bullet point that is on the slideshow.
On the non-existent slide.
Yeah, which you will all get. I'm sure it'll go out in your newsletter or be up on your website and all that stuff. But so yeah, the question was, in your current work in progress, what's the main question your protagonist needs answered, or the conflict or the problem that needs solving, and how early do you bring up this question?
Thank you.
And I was brought a bottle of water, so if y'all don't need a break, I can continue. So I think, yeah, that seems like
Okay. Go for it.
So the next part of your plot, the one that I get to meet a writer who says, no, writing the middle is the easiest part, what are you talking about? Is the citing middle. You've got your intro, you've got people hooked early, and now you have to get to the end. And that's often the hardest part. It's the middle third in terms of beginning, middle, and end, but for most books you read on structure, and really even people who don't stick to a structure, it just ends up being this way. It's actually half of your novel, at least, is that middle. And that's why it feels like it takes so long, because it does take that long. It is not a third, it is a half. And so one of the things, and I forget, there's a very famous author who said this, and I don't remember who it is, but you want to write the slow parts fast. And so what that means in terms of the middle of your plot is a a lot of times, and especially mysteries, I would say, and in terms of stuff that I'm intimately familiar with, but also I would say the hero's journey too. It's where much of the investigation of a mystery happens, or much of the exploration, if it's more science fiction fantasy. And so there's a lot of movement, which is great, but there's also a lot, usually, of travel, going to and from people who the investigator is talking to, the witnesses, or traveling from point A to point B literally, if it's something like a Lord of the Rings or a Hobbit situation. And so your genre will have expectations, but one thing you can do is let your readers fill in as many of the blanks as you can. The saggy middle was where you get a lot of stage direction. The character opened the door and walked through and found a chair and sat. Well, if they're coming to a meeting of a bunch of writers that's taking place where there's rows of chairs, your reader knows how that process works. You don't have to spell it out. But as we're drafting, usually, we're thinking about that, so we write it, which is fine. A lot of what I'm talking about today, you're going to change whenever you revise. But if you have it in your mind when you're writing, the revision process is easier. So that's always a good thing, because there's plenty to do in the revision process. So if you can cut some corners during the drafting process, I highly recommend it. Always remember this too: if you're getting bored writing it, if you're doing a lot of stage direction and all that stuff, if you're getting bored writing it, your reader's getting bored reading it. So you want to cut that out and say in 1 or 2 sentences what you took 1 or 2 paragraphs or 1 or 2 pages to do. Now, that said, in order to make a page count that you want to hit, either for commercial reasons or because you know that, okay, I'm writing a thriller and the average is 90,000 words, and if I try to get an agent with something that's 60,000 words, that's an automatic. They're just going to read your query and say, no, thank you, that's not even commercially viable. So, what you have to do is you have to get more story, add more story. And that's the harder part. In addition to cutting out things that you really like, killing your darlings, as Mr. King says, but taking out all the stuff and all the fluff and all of that, you're going to have to come up with more plot points. You're going to have to come up with more story or more characters sometimes. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. I always encourage people to have it's almost a false climax in the middle of your story, but mark that halfway point. And so if you're a plotter and you know about how long you want your story to be, right in that middle of your page count or of your story, have something happens, have a turn, have a reveal, have a twist. Before I read this in any craft book, I noticed it in some of the books I was enjoying, mainly Gone Girl, which some people really like it, some people really hate it, but its impact on the crime fiction scene is undeniable, and really in a lot of literature, not just because of how much it sold, but in the things it did that hadn't happened as often in most contemporary novels. But in Gone Girl, I won't spoil anything, but yes, they're almost right exactly at 50% if you're reading on a Kindle. It happens, and it is a really huge reveal, and it's not even close to the most exciting thing that happens in the third act. But it feels that way at the time because you're building. Everybody knows the chart. So, but always be thinking about what's going to happen in the middle, because then, if you study 3-act structure, you have your second act A and B, and you figure out what is going to divide them. Then you can start branching out from there, rather than doing it necessarily linearly. If you are a plotter, you can actually start with, okay, I want this to happen in the middle. This is my second biggest, most important part of the story, and then you can start working back from there. Which not only is a good exercise to do just for the sake of doing it and getting a feel for it, but if you're stuck with how you want to plot your story, changing that view can help. And when you execute this well, what you do is you ensure that your readers, even if they didn't love everything in, you break act 1 year in your second act, and things are good, maybe it's not the reader's cup of tea, but if you hit that midpoint, then all of a sudden they are really interested. Not only is it a false climax, but it can also be a second inciting incident. So then they get, they're interested, and if that interest is waning, hopefully it's not, but all readers are different, then you get them hooked again, and then you only have half of your story to get them to the end. And so, and it can even, if you want, you can, come up with almost, 2 interconnected stories, and write 2 shorter novels if you're having trouble getting to the full length that you want to get to. So, marking that halfway point and having it in your head as you're drafting has a lot of advantage. And then I said to write the slow parts fast. You also want to write the fast parts slow. Mr. Nichols will know for sure. A gunfight happens in about 10 to 30 seconds. And 30 seconds means it's like a shootout in the middle of, the Sunset Strip in LA. But that's how quick it happens. When you're reading a novel, it can take 5 or 6 chapters to get through, a gun battle. And in movies, that's definitely the way it happens. Taylor Sheridan, not so much, but he's, yeah, he's but yeah, so that's an example of writing the fast part slowly. There should be a lot happening, and this is a spot where you can really get into your characters' heads, and you can get away with having them think about something that's happening, that in real life is happening really quickly, but in their mind, they're reacting to things, they're remembering things, and is it super realistic? No, but this is fiction. We're delivering a story to people. A lot of times in your climax, you can reveal the most important piece of the background that your reader has been looking for. They really want to know why your character is so tortured, and you've been holding off, you've been feeding them other little pieces in the middle of the, excrement hitting the fan. You can reveal that, even though it is happening when things in real life are going absolutely nuts. And so that's part of pacing too, is knowing when to slow things down like that. You also usually want to take a little beat, a short scene, short chapter, after those major action set pieces if you have them, or the emotionally traumatizing events if you're writing YA romance, right after the breakup, which probably happens in the middle of your novel, by the way. Right after that, your character should take time to process that and go through that. And that's another place where you can reveal some of the backstory. You can have them dealing with that, either in solitude or hopefully with a friend of some kind. And in mysteries and thrillers, you usually have a partner detective or a sidekick of some kind. And if you don't, think about having one. But anyway, those are important. So, as I said, I'll put down books or read them more slowly when it's nothing but action, action, action the whole way through, because I need time to process what just happened. I need a little time to think about it as a person, as a reader, and that should be reflected in your novel to keep them moving through without looking up from the page. And then after you do that, after you write that fast part slowly, then resume your quick pacing and get to the end relatively quickly. In my debut novel, Deep Background, and I had not, read, Save the Cat or any of those other sort of craft books. I was a working journalist still at the time. I had a climax that really worked, but my novel was short. So what I do, I decided to add more story, and looking back, I needed to add more to the middle and not to the end, because a lot of people in the comments, reviews and stuff, they didn't say I couldn't finish this, but they said, I thought the story was over and I wish it had been. And so, not necessarily in a terrible way, just like I really enjoyed the climax, and then there was another 50 pages after that, and while that stuff was interesting, physiologically, I was ready for the story to come in for a landing after what had just happened, emotionally, and there was gunfighting because it's a thriller. But after that happened, emotionally, they were ready to be done with the book, and I just kept trying to add more stuff, and they're like, they're trying to race to the end too, because they were basically done with the main part of the story, and I just kept adding a few more things. So anyway, point is from climax to the end should be quick, and it should not. You should not add more, many more plot elements. You should be tying up the different elements you have going, and definitely introducing new characters, because at this point, the people know who the cast is. They don't want to try to imagine someone new. So now we will move on to the structure, as I was talking about earlier, how you tell your story, because we live in a world where we perceive time as flowing one way. I'm not going to get into quantum physics and stuff, but that is how we perceive time. So every story has that version of things start whenever I was 5 years old and they end when I'm 55. At the end of the novel. You almost never want to actually tell your story that way. If it's an epic, you can, and I have read and edited and enjoyed books that do that. But usually I enjoy it more whenever you start in the middle of something crazy happening and you reveal backstory as you're moving forward in time. So just remember that even if you know the story from beginning to end, you know your character inside and out, don't think you should start when they're that young and then finish whenever your story ends. I encourage utilizing multiple points of view. There's a lot out there on the internet from people who give advice about how to get agents and what they're looking for, that say, don't do that, have a character, and get in really deep with that character. And you want to listen to that second part, but you can do that with several characters. You can write third person, have 4 or 5 or 6 characters. You just need to make sure to take the time to develop all of your point of view characters, and also to some extent the side characters who are interacting with your people characters. But don't let anyone say you shouldn't write from multiple points of view, because this will help with your pacing. You can have one character have something crazy happen, cut it off, go back to the character who 2 chapters earlier, received a suspicious package at their desk at work, and then you cut away and you don't know what's happening there. But then the next chapter was somebody who was you left him with somebody pointing a gun at him. And those are not great ideas, but you get the feeling of what I'm getting at. And readers oftentimes like getting to know deeply more than one person. A lot of readers, especially in crime fiction, really enjoy getting to know the villain as much as they do the hero. And if you're like me, you have a main character who is not super likable, very complex, and you have a villain who's just on the very other side of being the bad guy. And so you need to fully develop those people, get into their heads. And in a thriller, you can actually reveal what the bad guy's doing and it becomes a race against the clock. Mysteries, you can't really do that. So mysteries a lot of times are told just from one point of view, but you can have your main character and you can get into their sidekick's head. You can see what their family's like in addition to your main character. And doing that also, if you're writing a series, sets up a lot more room to expand and write more books in the future, and to have spin-off series of someone who really loves a side character, and they also love your main character, but they really, really want to look about the side character. If you've already been with their point of view, then it's a lot easier. Multiple timelines. The internet will tell you, oh my goodness gracious, don't ever have more than one timeline. You will confuse your readers. No, you won't. Readers are smart. And they're smart because they read, or do they read because they're smart? That's a chicken and the egg question. Point being, trust your readers to know where you're going. And it used to be a faux pas to have subtitles on your chapters, listing whose point of view you were in, and even like what time it was in the day, depending on your genre. I feel like that's no longer true. I've done it both ways. My debut did not list any of that stuff. Divided States, my latest release, has what character you're in, where you're at, all listed before you even start the prose. I got no complaints, and I also got no complaints about people not understanding what was going on. I did the same thing for Let the Guilty Pay, which is when I used multiple timelines. And again, most people actually said your story was super easy to follow. Why are you asking me if this was hard to follow? I don't understand your question. Like in Beta and even with some other authors who read it later after it was published. So we all feel like that might be a concern, but don't let it be, especially during the drafting stage. If you find it is confusing, if your beta comes back and says, hey, I see what you're doing, I couldn't quite follow things, okay, then you have a place to work with. But multiple timelines, to me, not using them in some instances works against what we all know about show don't tell. So you're trying to get backstory in there and you keep having people talk about it, or you have really short flashback scene in the middle of a chapter. Those can work. I don't enjoy those. I would rather just give me a new chapter, let me see everything play out, and just make it clear what time you're in. The trick is to make sure that your two timelines are building on each other and they're both moving forward and they're interacting with each other, if not directly. You make a big reveal in the present timeline, and then maybe you explain it in the past, but at the end of that past timeline, you need to bring it around to where you're going to start the next one. Think of it as like that sign, where you have a level line and it goes up and down. That's how your timeline should interact with each other, and it can be a double helix, which you think might be confusing, but as long as you set the reader up for the jump in time, even if the character in the past just is thinking about a character who exists in the present timeline, then if that's on their mind, that's on your reader's mind, and then when you get back and that's the point of view character, then their brain has been primed to be thinking about that character. So that's one way you can do it. When people do stuff in multiple timelines and it doesn't work is whenever each timeline chops off and there's no connection at all between the past and present. And that happens sometimes when you write both timelines separately. I write from beginning to end. So even though I'm jumping back in time, I'm doing that as I am writing the novel from the beginning of the novel to the end of the novel. Some people do it differently, and where they struggle is making that connection before they jump timelines, and they spend a lot of time on those transitions. So it's kind of, which game you want to play. And one of the reasons you should use multiple timelines, if you have a story that lends itself to it, if you have a lot of backstory, or in my case, it was a crime that happened in the past that was affecting someone in the future. So I went back and I told the day that crime happened, and it's a mystery thriller, so there's no possible way that the way people thought it happened in the present timeline is the way it actually happened. That's an obvious reveal, right? Like that's making structure work to your advantage. But what you can do, and what you want to do if you're using two timelines, is have simultaneous climaxes that interact in the way I've been talking about. And they should happen, in a sequence. If you're writing a movie, it would be a sequence of scenes that kind of weave together. I can visualize it in my head, but explaining it to you is a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be. But you have two climaxes, and you want them to happen at the same time and interact with each other. But if you can do it, that's something that a lot of readers really, really enjoy. And you can have multiple points of view across multiple timelines. And so when I explain it in person, it always sounds like a complete dumpster fire, and there's no way it should work. But then Let the Guilty Pay, and I have to read it because it's I had a present timeline with a single protagonist told in the first person, and a past timeline that rotated between 3 other characters, all told in the third person. And because I like to make things even harder on myself, the story revolves around a book. So there's a book within a book, and there are excerpts from that fictional book interspersed, and they introduce the past timeline characters, and you discover that structure in your reading. And this true crime novel, the excerpts, they start out matching with what I'm about to describe in much more detail, but then they start not matching, and so that adds another level.
Which book is that? So we can go by.
Yeah.
It's Let the Guilty Pay, and I'll tell you right now, I discovered this morning that I am sold out. I have no more copies, so you'll have to order it in from Wildlark. So which they ought to be able to do, but it is available for next day shipping on Amazon and all that stuff probably. So get it from Wildlark, but if you mustn't, it's out there for you to buy. And I do apologize for that. But yes, that's, and I got this structure, with the exception of the book within a book, from Gillian Flynn's Dark Places. And she's not the only author I read on comics, as I know I mentioned her. But I like what she does with structure more than anything else. And she writes beautifully too, but yeah, I read that book, and the movie did not do it justice if you've only watched the movie. Please read the book. But you know, it employed a similar structure. And so I really loved how all that came about. So I studied that and broke it down and was able to use it in this very complicated book I was trying to write. And the only reason that Let the Guilty Pay worked, I think, is because I did that. And so I'm sure you all probably know this, but if you don't, read books and study how the story's told. Study characters for sure, study everything else, but look at how the story unfolds. Not just the events, but what the author does in terms of the structure. Because if you find what you really like, and you can steal a structure. I mean, you can't steal paragraphs and pages on the whole, but there's nothing saying that, oh, I love the way that author told that story, I want to do that. Go for it. So other things, the ticking clock. This can be completely on the nose. It can be a nuclear bomb is going to go off at X time, which happens in Divided States, which I do have written about. But it can be that obvious. If you're writing a thriller, then yeah, you can have a bomb that's going to go off at a certain time. Is it a trope? Yes, but it's a trope that readers love. So I think it's perfectly fine. And you can find a way to subvert that trope, which is what I tried to do. It can be a ransom that's due, or it can be just knowing that if your protagonist does not get herself out of this predicament, there are going to be dire consequences. And those dire consequences are hot on her tail. So it can be something less obvious, but it's called a ticking clock, for people who study and teach writing fiction. But it reminds the readers that, oh yeah, there are stakes, and the closer you get to the deadline, the more anxious your reader's going to get, because what is the one thing almost everybody on the planet worries about? Hitting their deadlines. So if you can make it to where the reader has that anxiety happening, that is one way to pull them through the story. Because they usually know that your main character is going to get out of trouble, but they still really want to see how it happens. And you can compress your overall timeline. No matter how many timelines you have, you can compress them all. Dan Brown likes to say that all his novels have to take place within 24 hours. That he has a rule about the novels he writes, and he writes thrillers and he sticks to them. I made that a rule for Divided States because it was an action thriller. I actually didn't need a full 24 hours whenever I got done with it. And in Let the Guilty Pay, the past timeline all takes place within one day, and again, not even full 24 hours. Now, if you're writing Lord of the Rings, then yes, you are not going to have everything happen in one day. But look for ways to compress that timeline when you can. If you have a certain step along your hero's journey that is, by design, a little exciting, see if you can make it more exciting by making everything happen in a quicker time frame. So, now that I've said all that, you can think about your favorite books as a reader and how they were structured. What literary devices did that author use? And see if your current work in progress or another idea that's out there in the future, see if you can apply that to what you're doing, and think about how you might execute it. And did the way that story was told, did it make you enjoy it more? Did it give you more pleasure to read because of those sleights of hand that the author did? Because they ended different scenes and different POVs at exciting moments and make you get to the next chapter and figure out what's happening. Did they have two timelines where in the present timeline something crazy is about to happen, and then they go back to the past where something crazy is also happening? So think about that. And show of hands, does anyone need a break, or do you want me to push on through? Pushing on through.
You could tell us something to do or think about if you wanted.
Yeah, no, that's what hopefully whenever you get home, you'll be thinking about the books that you enjoy that use different narrative structures that aren't just beginning to end, and think about how that enhanced your reading experience. Because if it didn't, then it's not sticking in your brain. And if you don't like stories told that way, then, every reader is their own, nobody's going to say, oh, you should really read this book because it's told this way. To me, books are like beer. Everyone has their favorite, and you shouldn't criticize anyone for why they like it. So now we're going to transition into the micro aspects, and it's a little bit more of a scientific approach to getting your readers to turn the page, and literally write a page turner if that is your goal. We'll talk about chapter length, cliffhangers, scenes, and paragraph. So, chapter length, this one is fairly simple. If you want people to keep turning pages, write shorter chapters. Not only does the brain like experiencing text in shorter chunks, but it also, especially if you employ cliffhangers, which we'll talk about, most readers, they're getting tired or it's getting past their bedtime. They go, how many more pages are in this chapter? And if it's only one or two, okay. And I might go, okay, how many pages in the next chapter? If it's only one or two, okay, I can read here, I can read here, and then it's 4 and 1. And so that should be your goal in crime fiction, and really it should probably be everyone's goal if you really want to keep your reader immersed in your story. So I would always make that a goal, is to make your reader tired. The best compliment, usually, that a thriller writer, especially in crime fiction for sure, whenever you get that comment from a reviewer or from a friend that said, thanks for not letting me get any sleep last night, you jackass. Which is a backhanded compliment, because they're like, yeah, I spent a night reading your story, and I was really dragging at work, but holy crap, what a story, let me talk with you about it. That's the best thing that can happen. Whenever you get a trade review or a word from another author that calls your story unputdownable, page turner, read it in one day, all that stuff, that puts the biggest smile on my face you cannot imagine. So, shorter chapters help with that. Cliffhangers. So, we all know that, the term comes from literally someone's hanging off a cliff and then you cut to the next scene, right? So, what you're doing whenever you write a cliffhanger, or a lot of people call it a hook at the end of the chapter, because it's I think of it as a hook. You've hooked them and then you're pulling them and you're reeling them into the next chapter. You're posing a question. Sometimes it's a literal question, and the chapter ends with a question mark. Sometimes it's a reveal. You reveal a key piece of information that the reader wasn't expecting, and they're like, holy, what is this now, man? So that's what a cliffhanger is, and there are different ways to do it. Sometimes it's ending on just something really very poignant, but that makes them think and go like, yeah, okay, I need to figure out why, that's the message that this reader delivered or received. And as I said earlier, you can do this with multiple points of view. You can have different kinds of cliffhangers happen with each character, and people are compelled to figure out what's going on. And even if the character has one favorite character and another one isn't their favorite, they will still read through. They may skim through that other character's chapters, but they will read them, and they will get the information to get to the chapter they really want to read, which means they're still turning those pages. I've never heard of anyone literally skipping entire chapters, because if you're doing your job, if they do that, they're going to be lost. Because each chapter needs to reveal information in a forward, moving forward, just not necessarily in the same time. Scene breaks. So, people who read mysteries and thrillers especially are familiar with there's a chapter, and then you have a page or 2 pages, and then there's a blank line of text, and it starts over, sometimes in the different character's point of view, but sometimes just in a different location. So that's a scene break, and you use those because, as I said, people enjoy getting their information in smaller chunks, but also it can be visually enticing to a reader whether they know it or not. And I'll get into this a little more later, but when people see big, huge blocks of text, their brain automatically goes, okay, this is going to be hard, and they're not in the mood to really do it, you know. But if there's a lot of white space because there are short sentences and short paragraphs, and there is a scene break on this page, then okay, this seems a little more doable. It's like would you rather read an email a lot of times that's 8 paragraphs, really dense, or something that's in 8 bullet points? You're going to choose the bullet point most of the time. And so the same theory applies to prose, even though we love our words, and we love taking a page to describe the color of the barn. Your readers don't, usually. There are exceptions, but for the purposes of this lecture, we're going to pretend like those exceptions aren't what we're talking about. And you can actually, in scenes, I'll make cliffhangers, but keep in mind, they're going to get the answer probably on that same page or in the same chapter. So say to if you come to the end of a scene and it's a really good hook, even if it's only a one-page chapter, make it a one-page chapter and make them turn that page. Rather than saying, okay, scene break and keep going and give them the answer, make it a page. And that'll increase your page count if you're worried about writing too short. And so I talked about paragraph length, where it's more visually enticing, and a lot of times it's it's just plain easier to read. There's no other way to really say it. And if, as a reader, you don't agree with me, then I am sorry, and we can talk about it later, because I've never met someone who would rather read one paragraph that's one page versus shorter, choppier stuff. Not that your sentences have to read choppy, just have to be shorter. And so, how do you do it without making every paragraph one sentence? More dialogue. And this is something that, especially beginning novelists, they have trouble with. They'll have an entire chapter and no one speaks. It's all internal, which is how we go through the world. Like, if there are some days, if I work from home, where I don't speak to anyone in the mornings until, my roommate comes home and says, hey, how's your day going? That happens in real life, but in fiction, you want there to be dialogue. Have characters talking to themselves out loud, or try to set up your scenes where there is more than one character, and that relates back to skip over the boring parts. Not that your character's inner life is ever boring, but in terms of a reader experience, you want them to have people interacting. And you want your character to be out there in the world, not sitting down, contemplating things, with the exception of right after the notes happen. That's the time to have that kind of chapter. And then, so this is one that actually you would need the slide for to see visually, because I kind of wrote, and reading to you is not going to be any good, but I call it the paragraph funnel, and it's kind of like how it sounds. You're coming up to the end of your chapter, and this incorporates everything I've been talking about. And you have a paragraph that's 2 or 3 sentences, takes up 2 or 3 lines, and then progressively your paragraphs get shorter. Doesn't mean they all have to be one sentence. They can be a long sentence and a short sentence, and then a longer sentence. You still want to do that. But basically on the page, it goes from over here, and it funnels down to where if you do it well, and if you do it naturally like I do, your last sentence might be 1 or 2 words, and maybe another question. And that is sort of the science behind getting people to physically turn more pages. And the reason you want to do that, in addition to getting that what a page turner blurb of review, is when a reader does that, they're physically reading, they're physically turning pages. The more they do that, their bodies, they're physiologically, their brain is going, man, I am tearing through this book. And even if they only read an hour a night, if they're turning a bunch of pages, they're getting through your story more quickly. And that goes back to what I said in the very beginning about how quickly they feel like they're consuming your story, which is the essence of pacing. And that's also an example of having a closed loop story. So, thank you. I really thought I would go a little longer, because I'm usually very long-winded. But let's take a short break now, and I don't know what time you usually end these. Okay, short break, and then I'll come back for Q&A. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions about what I talked about rewriting in general, about publishing, like whatever it is. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I listened to you at Love Book Festival. I listened to your spiel and loved it. You've got such good advice to give. One of the things I was telling you about, I was writing, and it deals with pacing because I was writing with a memory plus the present and going back into the memory. One of the things you said, and I wrote it down at the time, was err on the side of clarity.
Yes.
I've always thought about that. So in my chapters, you know, because you don't want to write your memory all in italics if you've got a pretty decent, because people have a hard time reading italics, long passages. So I've now started putting in the chapters, you know, when this was in the timeline. So that's clarity for me, and it would be clarity for an agent if they were reading it too, because I had gotten into reading things and I got confused from really good authors, and then, of course, myself, I confused myself totally, you know, because I'm not the good author that they are. So I've been erring on the side of clarity since you said that, and this has given me something else to question and ask you about, because I'm trying to get more clear, even get clear when I'm writing my chapters. I make a lot more chapters, like you said, and they're shorter. But in my chapter titles, I almost give away what's going to happen in the chapter because I'm being real clear to myself. If I need to go back to that chapter, which chapter did I write about this in? And then I can click on. But then I think, would you recommend changing the name of that chapter so you don't give away so much later, or just because I now see a lot of chapters, just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, no titles at all on them. But I have to put it while I'm writing it because it makes it clear for me.
So I don't write with chapter titles as you're describing them, but you know, in crime fiction, most people don't. That's, you know, YA, science fiction, fantasy. That's super common. In nonfiction, very, very common. In the end, I would suggest probably not giving away stuff in your titles. But while you're working in it, do whatever you need to make it easier to draft your novel. And even if you submit it to a publisher or to an agent with those chapter titles as they are, usually that stuff changes at that point. You know, they might say, hey, love the story, we need to work on your chapter titles and that sort of thing. And if you're gonna indie pub, then obviously that's on you. But yes, I wouldn't recommend giving away too much. One of the authors of the panel actually are the guy who founded it, Charles Amico. He uses chapter titles, but what they are a sentence or a line of dialogue completely out of context. And so it becomes like an Easter egg hunt in each chapter to figure out where it is. And it's an evocative line usually, but it's out of context, so people are like, whoa, what on earth is going to happen in this chapter? So that's, you know, one way to do chapter titles. But yeah, I would suggest not giving away much before the chapter even people have a chance to read your prose. I think your instincts are correct, but there are a lot of different places where you can change that. So if you're still drafting a novel, you know, if you want searchable titles, searchable chapters, keep them until the very end. But good, very good question. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about prologues. I've heard opinions. Some say don't put a prologue, just call it chapter 1. So do you have an opinion, or what do you think is best?
I do have opinions on prologues, believe it or not. I think that prologues are fine if they are not chapter length. If they're the length of the chapter, then yeah, there's no reason not to call it chapter 1. There's also an issue of when something takes place. So your prologue, in my opinion, should do one of two things. It should either be taken from later in a crazy scene, and movies do this all the time. They'll show somebody, close up from a low angle, somebody coming down with an axe, and you don't even know who many of the characters are, but you're like, holy crap, what am I about to get into? So I'm in favor of doing that as long as it's, a page or two. And if there's an event that is important that literally takes place 20 years before the start of your narrative and you're not doing two timelines, as long as it's out of context. And that's what I say to people who write prologues, is all like the chapter titles I was talking about. If it's something exciting that is happening out of context that is going to make your reader go, holy crap, I got to figure out what that was about. Because they like intrigue. You don't have to answer all the questions. You have to ask the questions early, but short, punchy. Let's see. I guess it's the one prologue I did, and and I repeated it in a sequel to Let the Guilty Pay that we don't talk about because I should not have written the sequel, but it was a contract. And anyway, so we don't talk about that one. But Let the Guilty Pay is the one that I want to talk about. Its prologue was, I told you it was a book within a book, right? So it was a very short excerpt, and it was just describing how the blood from that crime scene had stained the entire town, and that was introducing a theme, and throughout the book. And so, but yeah, it was very like, okay, so there's definitely going to be blood and reaction to that blood in the story, and if that's what you're about, you're turning the page. If that's not what you want to read about, then you're not. Although I think the cover was pretty self-explanatory. But yes, short. If it can be a literary device and not actual prose, I like that. A lot of people use epigraphs. I think a lot of times, which if you don't know what that is, that's a quote usually by a famous person that just precedes the start of your story. I think they can act as better prologues a lot of times than the prologues you actually get. Science fiction fantasy has a lot of prologues, and sometimes it's involved with the world building and everything. So consult and listen to the tropes that are common in your genre. But I will say for prologues, the shorter the better. If it's a chapter length, call it chapter 1. And if it doesn't take place before the main events of your story, it can probably be inserted in a little more in the timeline as its own chapter, even if it feels more exciting than what was happening before. Now that said, if it's super exciting, you can keep it short, and it can just be like, what on earth is happening? Then you can put it in there. Now, obviously, I just basically took 2 minutes to tell you you can do whatever the heck you want. And that's almost the point. You get these rules. I was talking to somebody earlier. Do this, don't do that. Do this, don't do that. There are no certainties. Every novel is different. Every prologue is different. But if you're trying to decide whether or not you should or should not include one, try to keep it short. Try to keep it out of context. Above all, keep it exciting, because this is the first thing you're reading, right? So it has to be exciting. If it's 2 pages describing the landscape of your Middle-earth thing, I would put that somewhere a little further down the line after you've hooked your reader. And a lot of times it's a feeling. I think even in one of Linda's books, we were a critique group, and we read like her 3rd chapter or something, and we, like me and several others, went, wow, that is exciting. What if you made that your prologue? It was a short chapter too. So sometimes it just is a feel thing. Now, if your goal is to get an agent or an editor at a publisher to look at your story, that's when you can be cautious. And remember, you can write the prologue, but you don't have to submit the prologue to whoever it is. If you don't think that they will appreciate a prologue, don't include it then. And then once you've sold them on your book and they've agreed to be your agent or whatever, then submit the full manuscript.
Have you written any unreliable narrator, like Gongo?
Yes, Let the Guilty Pay, that is, that narrator is unreliable. In Divided States, I don't think anybody's really unreliable there. But yeah, Let the Guilty Pay definitely is an unreliable narrator. And the reason that I had several agents who were interested, but whenever I told them, and I'm not going to spoil anything, when I told them how and why the narrator was being unreliable, they said, oh, well, readers right now, they want amnesia or blackout drunk or whatever, like go on the train and stuff like that, because that's what was hot at the time. And so they said, I don't think I can sell this book, but I really hope somebody publishes it, to which I said, gee, thanks. But,
how did you come up with, like, it's really hard to write it because you're giving the reader the wrong information because they don't know what's going on.
You have to play fair, is what I would say. So they have to be unreliable for a reason. And I had what I think is a very human reason, and I've got no complaints about
Can you
it.
tell us what the reason?
No.
Well,
If you think about the title, Let the Guilty Pay, you have your answer of why the person's lying.
why are they unreliable? So they're not.
Well, an unreliable narrator is lying to your reader up to a point. That's what being unreliable.
They don't know. It could be that, like, if they're drunk, blackout drunk, they don't know what happened.
I hate that trope, but yes, that is
You hate that trope, but you know
That's
it's
what-
on from. It's not unreliable.
She's not a blackout drunk, though.
No. And Girl in the Train was, she was.
Girl in the Train, I think, yeah, that was not. enjoyed the writing to some extent, but yeah, that was definitely not my favorite one. But anyway, yeah, the trick to an unreliable narrator is playing fair with the reader and having a reason for being unreliable, but also not with giving them the information and disguising it is the way I would put it. Because they, because what you want to do, and this is not related to pacing, but it's a good thing to think about if you don't already. The reason people like thrillers and they like mysteries is they get, during the climax usually, that aha moment where something is revealed and everything they've read up to that point all of a sudden makes sense, and it makes sense just like that. And you actually, physiologically, readers get a dopamine hit. And they get that pleasure from figuring something out. And usually they're trying to guess along the way, so if you can lead them down the wrong path, and then, that's even better if you can do that. But yeah, you have to reveal enough, and reveal things in a certain way, and have dialogue and prose written in a way that when they get to that reveal, the way you phrase it is either technically not lying, or it is a double entendre that has two meanings and they chose the wrong one, they chose the more obvious one. And that takes work, and that's during revisions. That, Let the Guilty Pay took a few revisions before it even saw the editors of Fox Press. But yes, that is something that takes a lot of work, and one of the reasons why it is scary and why a lot of books do it terribly, and it's not a good thing. But it's been a few years, the reviews have come in, and I did what I set out to do. But yeah, it definitely took, I had to go back and look at individual lines and say, okay, am I being fair with the reader? And as long as you're fair with them in those ways, then that's what they like. And really, if they're reading a thriller, and they like the unreliable narrator trope, which you should reveal in your marketing text, like the first line of my back cover blurb in my Amazon is, Bartholomew Beck has a secret. So automatically, okay, so we're dealing with secrets and lies and unreliability. So as long as I know that going in and you can deliver on that, then that's what they're reading for. They're reading for that high that they get during the final reveal. But yeah, be fair with the reader and be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Which is funny. Be very deliberate with the way you phrase things when you're dropping a clue. Because, readers will remember, no matter how long your book is, they'll remember that stuff, and when it all makes sense for them, that's what they're going for. But yeah, it's know what you're getting into.
I was in our older short story, in which it was unreliable narrator. But the narrator did not know they were unreliable.
And that's the more common thing.
She'd been kidnapped. She was in the closet. And she had been there for years and had created this whole other world and things that she was doing, but it was all taken place in her head. And you don't know it until the end of the story, and you're like, oh my God, no, she's still in that office.
Okay.
Yeah, it was riveting.
Yeah, and so, in my opinion, the bad way to do that trope is, I blacked out for a night and I woke up with blood on my hands, like, okay. But, something like that where it's very psychological, that's a psychological thriller with an unreliable narrator. That's, I'm very glad that you gave her a good reason to have these internal hallucinations, or for lack of a better word.
Yeah, she's trying to escape.
Yeah, yeah.
And she makes this storm, and then the guy who kidnapped her comes into this, and then going out with the she starts supporting. She starts seeing cracks in her.
Yeah. The bad version of that is it was all a dream. If you're working on a story where it was all a dream, I beg you to please reconsider, because readers do not like that. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to have an entire season of television or something like that. But if anybody has ever watched, I haven't watched the whole series, but Mr. Robot. There's a season where it is taking place in his head, and that's the same thing. You think you're on one path and things have happened, and then there's a disconnect with what's happening, and eventually you figure out no, I won't say because of spoilers, but it's the same concept and that works. That is the good version of that trope. The bad version is, the entire season is in jail or something. But yeah, very, very good question.
I know, I was gonna say jail.
Anybody else?
Can you talk a little bit about Blue Handle and what y'all do?
Yes, I can. I try very much not to be a shill for people who employ me, but yeah. So Blue Handle is a small traditional press like the ones who published my books, Black Rose and Fox Press, except we publish fewer titles because I guess we've been going at it in its current form for about 2 years, but starting a small business just takes a while. So we're very selective, but we publish good stories. We try to make sure that it's commercially viable to where everybody makes money, because the major publishing business model is they get one Gone Girl and then they publish a whole bunch of stuff that is maybe or maybe not going to make money. We're small, so we can't do that, which is why we're so selective. But if you want, I have some business cards and I can give them to you, and you can submit your stories. Just email me on my email address. But yeah, that's what Blue Handle is. And then we have Book Puma, which we're trying to do something interesting and different there. It is an author services platform, so it's something you pay for. Now, what I will say is we are not a hybrid publisher. If you pay for our Book Puma services, we will not publish your book under Blue Handle, because that's taking money from you up front and then taking the money on the back end, and that's hybrid publishing, which I don't condone, don't like. It's a weird cottage industry that popped up, and it's all those commercials you see on TV, ChristianPublishing.com or whatever, paper reading books or that kind of stuff. That's not fair to use authors. And you guys, I tell this to people, and sometimes it's revelatory, sometimes it's very, no shit Sherlock. But publishers don't exist without authors. So you, as the storyteller, hold the leverage. And you hold the leverage all the way up until the minute you sign, and you shouldn't be negotiating for stuff, or your agent should be, if you get an agent, all the way up until the minute you sign for something. Because the publisher, if they're interested in your book, they need you more than you need them. Because you can always independently publish, and sometimes you can make more money independently publishing. We tell that to people who want us at Blue Handle to publish their books all the time. Based on your genre, based on maybe the length of your story, like I said, if it's super short, based on several factors, we think you would make more money if you self-published. And I'll give them as much free advice as I'm allowed to without my boss going, hey, we actually are supposed to charge that through Book Puma. But yeah, and so it's, you guys, without storytellers, there are no publishers. So I'll always remember that. As far as the Book Puma stuff goes, for people who want to independently publish or who want to get help getting their story in the best shape possible to submit to agents and to submit to editors at larger publishers than us, we have some standard services, but we actually just, literally on Friday, we got the site live. It's called bookpumalive.com, and it's a subscription model. So, it's which sounds interesting and different when you think about an author-editor relationship. Usually it's kind of a freelance deal, it's one fee, you can split it up into payments if you want. But we're trying to become a mix of a hotline and an editing service. So for $45 a month, if you're in the planning stages, we call it Plan with the Puma. And I came up with these because I like alliteration. and Book Puma's fun. So Plan with the Puma, you can get us on the phone, you can get us on email, and we will help you with structuring your story, getting an outline, character development, whatever you need. And like I said, it's payment monthly, and you get so much time for phone calls and so many pages edited in terms of an outline and that kind of thing. We'll go over, look at your outline, make changes, suggest changes. And you also get access to our library of training videos. What you just heard me talk about is actually one of them, but we have 3 or 4 different people doing stuff all the way from copy editing to getting through writer's block, that sort of stuff. So you get access to that. And we post new stuff. We will be posting more new stuff soon once that part of the site where we can add more videos becomes fully functional, because as I said, we're building this thing. And then once you plan with the Puma, you can write with the Puma, which would be more like traditional editing. $175 a month gets you a certain amount of pages and phone calls. You can always email us with questions. But that's where we edit as you write, or if you have a completed manuscript, you can still sign up for that, and that entitles you to so many pages, and then it's also a discount on our normal editing services, which those of you who've hired editors for any reason, full-length books is thousands of dollars. There's just no way for an editor to make a reasonable wage on something that's 90,000 words long. And then for $300 a month, we have Publish with Puma, which is where we can help you walk you through self-publishing if you have questions. We can format your book. We don't do the editing. If you want the editing, we'll send you back and recommend the Write with Puma. And we can help you set up the technology. We can be, if you keep paying us, we'll be your IT specialist, and you can get us on the phone, once a week for an hour and talk you through whatever trouble you're having. And if you want to submit to an agent or even an editor at a bigger press than ours probably, we have access to Publisher Marketplace, so we can give you leads on agents based on who is actually selling books, because there are a ton of agents out there, but some of them haven't sold anything in 20 years, but they just still have an active website. So people who are currently selling books in the marketplace right now, and we can help you write your query letter, we can help you write your synopsis, and we can put together a compelling package. We also do, at Blue Handle, we pitch to TV and film people and have some no money holds, so no money options. Definitely not Mr. Tarantino. I love that. That is such a cool story, by the way. But yeah, we have some places who have a first look deal with us, and so we know how to put together pitch decks and all that stuff for doing to film. So we'll help with that kind of stuff. But the goal is to make it to where it's smaller payments on a monthly basis, based on what it is you need, and the goal is to find people who want to plan with the Puma, then they want to write with the Puma, and they want to publish with the Puma, and helping out authors. But the point is getting us on the phone and guaranteeing that here are my questions. Let's talk through things, because a lot of editors say, hey, let's just kind of communicate through email. Give me your manuscript, and in 6 weeks, if you haven't heard from me, give me a shout. Like, oh, people need help right now, and especially the plan with the Puma, because a lot of people are like, I have a great story, but I don't even know where to begin writing. Hey, guess what? We do know where you should begin writing. So that's our goal anyway. And then if you have a full manuscript and you just want us to edit our thing the old-fashioned way, we'll do that for you. But that's what Puma is, and we're trying to kind of disrupt the way things usually work, because almost everybody has a bad experience with that step in their process, and or people who have done it, or people who have had books published by traditional publishers who have independently published stuff. We have people who specialize in copy editing, people who specialize in developmental editing, people who specialize in character development. So anyway, that's the spiel, and you can just get a hold of me, and I can send you the links with more information and all that stuff. And the video library is designed to function like masterclass, but the production value is not as good. I will tell you. That's why it's pretty much included free in all the different subscriptions. But our overall goal is to help authors. Do we want to run a business and make money? Of course we do. But we also want to make sure that more authors, that more writers can get their work out there, and they can be confident in what they're putting out there. Because a lot of the indie pub writers we talk to who want advice, or maybe want us to buy the backlist on Kindle, they say that I put my stuff out there and I just wasn't sure how people would react and if it was a good story. And it's like, well, we know what good stories are. Like, not just in theory, but there are books that are won awards, my books don't win awards. I mean, it's like we know how to tell stories, so we we can make sure that you are telling the best version of your story. And it sounds like I'm getting the hook because I can talk forever. And yes, we've got a couple minutes, so I imagine somebody has to get up here and do the wrap. Thank you all very much.
I have read many of his books, and they are wonderful. He's just a great writer. I was also in a critique group with him for a while, and I really enjoyed that. So
I was what critiquers call the comma queen. I specialized in lightheaded reading.
yeah.
I wasn't an a-hole about it. I don't think that. Linda may have a different opinion, but.
Well, they're all good, and he wins so many awards. Every time I turn around, he's won another one, and it's just, he's amazing. We're going to vote on the logos. Okay, this is the original that we have now. Does anyone want to keep this? If you do, raise your hand.
Sorry.
One vote, 2 votes. Okay. Okay. So this is the next logo with the white person, whatever. We need to name him. Yeah. Okay.
I got the count.
Okay. And then the third logo is without a lot of color. Okay. Okay. So Fallon is counting, so.
You want to tally now? A couple for the original, 11 for the new, and 7 for the Texas. So I think it's the adaptation of the original.
Right, okay, the second logo is the one that wins. So, does anyone have member news? Do you have any news to share?
The Lubbock Public Library has this program called, what's it called? It's a book club. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm sorry. You can go check out a duffel bag full of 10 or 15 copies of one book, take it to your book club. And so you can have a whole book club in the back, right? So a couple of years ago, they started this program, and I read about it, and I was like, I will provide 10 copies of my book. And so I got my book in their book club thing. And they're starting a new cozy mystery book club at Go to Key Library this month, and they chose my book to be the launch book for the club. So so it is March 29th, I believe. It's like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So take off work early. It's fine. It's for an important reason, but I'm over it. It is called, okay, so the series is called Trailer Park Princess, and the title of the book is The Middle Finger of Fate. So it is a cozy mystery, humorous, it's set here in Lubbock. The whole series is set here in Lubbock, so you can see familiar places and then some things that it's made up. But it's a fun book. Oh yes, preview it next month. I forgot about that. So we're going to have our own Fallon and KJ are going to be presenting for the April meeting. It's called Tech Tools for Creators. Is that right? And so they're going to be talking about all these different things that we can use to for our creativity and to manage our business. We're going to do a little bit about AI, which is a hot topic right now, but how we can use all these things to manage, get our readers, and keep our creativity flowing. So it's going to be a really great interactive presentation. So I'll be here for that.
Okay. Anyone else?
I had a short story that was reprinted. This is the third time it's been reprinted. It was originally in the magazine Fantasy and Science Fiction, and then it was published in Tour's Year's Best Science Fiction years ago. And it was reprinted on an online thing. Now it's been reprinted again, so I'm just glad that it keeps doing that.
Oh, congratulations. Anyone else, Keith?
I published a collection of ghost stories earlier this week called Visitors After Dark. It's only available electronically right now.
Oh, okay. Anyone else? Vera?
I'm going to mention one thing, the importance of networking and relationship, and I'm going to say that through Dan, who mentioned me to his wife, who's an English teacher at Matthews Academy. I went and did a presentation for those kids. It was scary, but they actually, I walked them through a prompt. So I would just say, build your network and build your relationship and deliver. That's the most important.
Well, my new book came out Tuesday. First one, the Handler's Daughters. And so it's on sale now. And so I have a few to sell if anyone wants any. Just see me after. Okay, let's draw the raffles.